Hi, my name is Carrie Lisweer Bettinson, and I'm going to be reviewing the book Educated by Tara Westover. This is one of the New York Times bestsellers recently, and it is not only a nonfiction, but the subcategory is a memoir, and it's about the author's life and about her upbringing and her belief system and how she overcame a lot of the obstacles in her life. So she grew up in a survivalist, very extreme religious family in a small town in Idaho. She was one of, I believe, 7 children. She was at the end of her family, the youngest girl. And the story is mostly linear of her life, starting when she was a young child, her earliest memories with her mother and her family, up until adulthood, up until college and current times. But without giving too much away, I want to start from the beginning. But she does do a lot of back and forth and flashbacks throughout later in her story. So her family owned a property in the middle of nowhere in a small town in Idaho. And she was raised with the belief that their family needed to prepare at all costs for essentially an apocalypse or a second coming of the Savior. And to be prepared, they had to be very self-sufficient. They had to learn to mix their own herbs. They couldn't rely on anything from the government. They distrusted public schools. And this is throughout all of her siblings, but her being at the tail end of it, she had mentioned that her younger siblings and her got the most extreme part of it. She believed that her father had symptoms of bipolar disorder, although he was never diagnosed because he had such a distrust in doctors and the medical system, and so they would never go see doctors for anything, not broken bones, not burns. And he relayed that same message to his children with the fear of, if you do that, it's proving that you have unfaithfulness or disloyalty to God, and that you will be punished for that, and worst case scenario, even be damned for it. And so that fear of not relying on their self-sufficiency and not relying on herbs and the product of their own land, or on prayer, was very scary for her, and it manipulated a lot of her decisions growing up. So she also midwifed with her mother from a very young age. She was her assistant. She learned to mix herbs. She learned to depend on those and use no medical intervention at any circumstance. But as she begins her teen years, she feels that her belief system starts to change, and she starts to realize patterns of verbal abuse and physical abuse from one of her brothers, and verbal abuse from her father. And she starts to do things in secrecy because she doesn't want to get in those arguments and to disappoint her family and have those repercussions from that. So she falls into that cycle, and luckily she does have some older siblings who have been able to get themselves out of the situation, move away from home, manage to get into college and pass the ACT. And so she really idolizes one particular brother. His name is Tyler. And so she seeks his help in how she can get into college, which her choice is Brigham Young University in Utah. And it's a highly religious school within the religion she grew up in. And so she feels that she's justified in this, even though her family is very strongly against public schools. And she knows nothing. All of her knowledge comes from self-taught math books, hand-me-down history books. And so as time goes on, she starts to really push herself and motivate herself, and she's fueled by anger, and she's fueled by wanting to escape and wanting to run away. And she tries, she fails, she tries again, and she passes the ACT. She moves on to college. She's able to have really influential professors that help her get financial aid, help her do study abroad. Eventually, she is able to travel to Cambridge University, and is able to do interning there and eventually get into school there. And that's when she really starts to dissect her belief system entirely, start to hang out with different types of people. And she tries her first couple of ibuprofen pills, which is a big part of her book, and she's just waiting to be struck down, just waiting for the consequences of that, like she was taught as a child. And so she starts to develop her own belief system, and she starts to pull away from what her parents believe, and following that also pull away from her parents. And so there's the book is just a lot of back and forth about changing the way she thinks, and standing up for herself, and getting out of toxic relationships. And I feel like that's a very important message for teenagers. Although there is some profanity and there is some heavy subjects in this book, I do feel it's an appropriate book for a teenager who may be learning how to dissect their belief system and what they stand for. There is not any pictures inside this book. There is a great one on the cover, though, of her on the mountain she grew up in, inside of a pencil, obviously, and stands for her education and how that mixes with her upbringing. So you should read it. Thank you.